Top Republicans, as Bob and I were just discussing, continue to criticize that meeting over dinner between former President Trump, white nationalist Nick Fuentes, and rapper Ye at Mar-a-Lago. Ye, also formerly known as Kanye. For more on this, Joe Lieberman joins us now. He is a former senator from Connecticut. I know that well. Spent a lot of time chasing Joe Lieberman around Capitol Hill. He was also Democratic nominee for vice president in 2000. Senator Lieberman, always a pleasure to see you. Look, a lot of people have kicked around the now infamous dinner at Mar-a-Lago. Quickly, your thoughts on what it means and when a former president says, I need to rearrange the way people get to come to have dinner with me. That really doesn't pass the smell test to me, does it to you?
It doesn't. And in some ways, I think this ought to effectively end Trump's credible chances of being the Republican nominee or being president. It's just unacceptable behavior. You know, he says he didn't know that Fuentes was coming to dinner, but he did know that Kanye West was coming. And Kanye West has been out there as a really grotesque, gross anti-Semite. So here he was sitting down with basically two anti-Semites and one racist, Fuentes. And it's just unacceptable behavior for a person who's running for the presidency of the United States, because it legitimizes these haters. I mean, these cancers of bigotry are growing. They're still, I'm confident, limited to a minority of the American people. But when you see leaders of that extreme, hateful, racist, anti-Semitic movement having dinner at Mar-a-Lago as the guests of former President Trump, it legitimizes the hate that they're spewing, and it's just harmful for our society. So I appreciate that a lot of the Republicans have spoken out against what Trump has done, and they're beginning to speak out against him because he's a loser as far as I'm concerned.
And Senator Lieberman, just for the audience's benefit, explain the kind of controls even a member of Congress, but certainly a senator, and obviously a former president would have over who does or doesn't sit down to dinner with you.
Yeah, so this is part of what my complaint here, my criticism. He knows who Kanye West is. He knows what West has been saying, the awful anti-Semitic stuff. He knows that big international businesses have cut ties with West because of his anti-Semitism, and yet he invites him to Mar-a-Lago and brings him to the main table so everybody can see him. As to Fuentes, I'll take the former president at his word. He didn't know who he was, but all anybody close to the president had to do was to go online and Google or Wikipedia this guy, and it just jumps out how foul he is, and how the president should not be having dinner with him. So he can't claim this innocence anymore. He's got, people say he's not an anti-Semite. I don't believe he is either. But you come to a point where you begin to say things and do things that encourage racism and anti-Semitism, and people are going to begin to think, well, maybe that's really who he is. And I just think for his own reputation, let alone for the future of our politics in our country, he's got to cut it out.
I want to ask you if you think that's an important distinction that we need to talk more about, Senator Lieberman, which is, personally, I'm not an anti-Semite, or personally, I'm not a racist. But if you are in your actions or with whom you are seen with giving either voice or some kind of indirect endorsement of it, is that, if not, it's not the same, obviously, but it's in an adjacent place that deserves to be scrutinized intensely, does it not?
It does. And look, when you're a leader, and President Trump, former president, candidate for re-election, is a leader, your actions and your statements have consequences beyond the behavior of regular people. And in this case, sitting down with Kanye West, who has over 32 million people who follow him on Twitter, and Fuentes, who has a much smaller following, but it's rabid and extreme and racist and anti-Semitic, he gives him credibility. And look what happened after the dinner. Kanye went right out and gave an interview, and so did Fuentes. And as far as they were concerned, the president was impressed with both of them. It's a real smear on him, on Trump. And you do get to a point. I mean, I know people say, and he says he was very pro-Israel. Yes, he was. He has a daughter who converted to Judaism. Yes, that's true. He loves her, I'm sure. But if this pattern, he did this in a statement after the neo-Nazi rally at Charlottesville. He's done it again here. And you have to begin to say, no matter how friendly he is to Jewish people in his own life, he's encouraging the haters, the racists, the anti-Semites in our country to come out of their caves. And that's bad for our country. It's just not the American way. It's not the way our founders intended this country to be. I just happen to be looking at the Constitution, Major. I'll just state it briefly. What an unusual, amazing thing that are the founders, the people who wrote the Constitution, all Christians, put into the Constitution in Article 6 a clause that there never can be a religious test for holding public office in the United States of America. I mean, what greatness and fairness. And these people are just totally contrary to that.
I know you have thoughts on this, Senator Lieberman. Yeah. In your public life, you've watched this trajectory of anti-Semitism. It has intensified visibly and become more apparent through violence in the last 3 to 5 years. I'm not going to ask you to unravel all of that, but what are your thoughts and level of concern about that trajectory?
Well, I am really concerned about it. Your question, in my case, is a really important one, maybe revealing, because in my political life, in my life, I never faced any anti-Semitism. I mean, I ran for the U.S. Senate in Connecticut 4 times, got elected. The Jewish population there is about 2%. I ran for vice president in 2000. There was no overt anti-Semitism. Now, did I think that there were no anti-Semites in America? No, of course not. That hatred is always there, but the prevailing ethic in our country kept them in their caves and under the rocks. Something's happened in the 22 years since 2000, and probably in the last decade. Part of it is the internet and the tremendous access that obviously the internet is wonderful in so many ways, but it gives the haters an opportunity to feed each other and then come out publicly. And then what leaders say and do in response to overt expressions of hatred, racism, bigotry encourages people or discourages them. And I'm afraid now the haters and the extremists feel that they can say and do whatever they want. And it's really hurting our country. It's got to stop. And I hope it's a big issue in the presidential campaign in both parties leading up to 2024.
Well, Senator Lieberman, there are indications it might be an issue as Republicans decide whether or not Trump should be their leader again in 2024. We thank you so much for your time, Senator. Always good to see you.
Thanks, Major. Great to see you again.